Welcome back to my kitchen. I'm Chef Deborah from Rocca's Bakery in Greensboro, North Carolina. And today we're going to take our puff pastry and our pastry cream that we made in our last episode, and we're going to make some wonderful sweet treats today, all French connected. First treat is going to be our French voie vents, which is a fruit tart made out of puff pastry, our pastry cream, and all this beautiful fresh fruit that you see here today. Then we're going to do a baked Brie and Papillote, which is a round wheel of Brie encased in the puff pastry. And then we're going to make a brown sugar pecan glaze to go over top of that and serve that with fresh fruit. And then we're going to make a simple palmier cookie, which is a roll of puff pastry with butter and cinnamon and sugar. And it's the kind of cookies that a lot of Chinese buffets have, where they look like little elephant ears. They're shaped like this. And but they're simple to make, and they're just a delight, and you can fill them with anything, but we're going to do cinnamon and sugar today. So I'm going to get the heavy whipping cream, and I've sweetened it with powdered sugar and our Whip It stabilizer, and this is called chantilly cream. So we're going to fold this into the pastry cream, and it's going to be a wonderfully light and very delicious. So we're going to press this a little bit, because the pastry cream, once it cools, I think I told you in our last episode that it's going to get stiffer even when you saw it in the pot. So we're going to press the whipped cream a little bit into here just to soften the cream up a little bit so that we can fold the rest of it into the cream. And you can use this, it's my little hybrid pastry cream. There's no French name for the combination of chantilly cream and pastry cream. This is more like a Boston cream, but it's not as loose. So this is my little hybrid recipe that I make for our bakery, and it works well for a lot of the tarts, because we don't want to add butter to this because we're already using a lot of butter in our pastry. And we put a lot of whipped cream in this. We're actually going to use this in one of our later episodes to make a wonderful treat. I'm not going to, it's a secret, I won't tell until we start that episode. Don't want to spoil the surprise. But I can tell you, as I'm mixing this, we have a favorite customer, a little boy whose name is Connor, that comes into our bakery. And he's been coming into our bakery since he was probably 2 or 3 years old. And he's now, I think he's maybe 10 or 11. He has a special name for me, and when he was really young, he couldn't understand who I was, and because I would be coming and going, and he wouldn't see me there all the time because I'd be in the kitchen and I wouldn't be in the retail store side. And so one Saturday I was out there greeting our customers, and little Connor and his little sister and parents came in, and he asked his daddy, and he said, "Who's that lady back there?" His daddy said, "That's the boss." And he looked at me and he said, "That's the boss lady." And so ever since then, he doesn't know my first name. I'm just known as the boss lady. And he loves these voie vents that we're making today, and he loves our brownies. So I'm making this, Connor. Hi, if you're watching today with your mom and dad. Hope school's going well. But every time he'd come into the bakery, he'd run in to see what was in the case, to see if we had any of his favorites. He would scream at the top of his lungs, "Boss lady, are you here? Are you here?" And he was so precious. It's fun to see our customers grow up and get bigger, and kind of sad at the same time, because the wonder of the bakery gets lost a little bit, you know, when the kids start to age and get a little bit older. But he still presses his nose to the case and looks for the sugar cookies that we make in real bright colors and different shapes for the boys and girls, and our brownies. So I think we've got this pretty well creamed together. As you can see now, it's beautiful and it's silky, but it's still nice and stiff and holds a shape, so that if we wanted to pipe this through a piping bag and a tip and make some kind of a design on top of a pastry, we can certainly do that. And that's why I like to use the stabilized chantilly cream, because it does mix into the pastry cream without having to use extra butter. So it does make a beautiful, beautiful cream. So we're going to go ahead and put this in a smaller bowl and get it in the cooler while we make our voie vent tart shells, because we're going to need this counter space, and this is temperature sensitive. So let me get this in the cooler real quick, and we'll be back and start rolling out our dough. So we pulled our nice puff pastry from the cooler. It's nice and hard, but not too hard. You can still bend it and not break it. That's exactly what we're looking for. We've got a little bit of our flour, our rolling pin. I do have some egg wash, which is 1 beaten egg and 1 tablespoon of water, with our pastry brush, a fork, and our cutters. Now, I like to make square voy events, but you don't have to do square. You can certainly do round. But this is about a 4-inch square, and I'm looking to get something about a 1/2 inch smaller, because we're going to be making little strips out of this so that our voy events raise tall. So we're going to be laying the strip on top of the larger one. So we do need 2 sizes of cutters. So if you wanted to use round cutters, your biscuit cutters, whatever, that's completely up to you. But I like the looks of the square one for me anyway. So they're not hard to find. You can get them as a set. They come, I think, in seven cutters to a container. You can get those on Amazon as well. I don't remember how much they are, but they're not that expensive. But they're a great tool to have. So we're going to start working our dough, and we don't want to press really hard. As you can see, the dough is cold. And one of the things when we're rolling out the puff pastry dough, because it does not have any leavening in it, any action like the yeast or baking powder or anything like that to make it raise, we don't want to go, and I'm not going to do this, so I don't want to crush the edges. We don't want to go over the edge and push it down, because that will actually ruin and smash all those thousands of layers we've worked hard to create. So we're just going to roll from end to end. And then, because we don't have to worry about what direction we're rolling in right now, like we did when we were rolling and folding, we can turn the dough and roll it widthways, because we want to get this to about 22 inches by about 10 inches. So it does require a little bit of rolling, and it's great. You don't have to go and go to the gym and work out your triceps or your biceps. You can make some puff pastry dough. I think I've said in one of my other videos, my Blitz Danish dough video, you know, we have a laminating dough machine in our bakery, which does all the hard work for me now. But before that, I had a 30-pound roller, a rolling pin, a stainless steel rolling pin, and I would have at least 5.5 foot long Danish pastry rolling out on the workstation, and it would take me about an hour to roll it out. So it was a lot of work. And people wonder why my biceps and triceps are so big, and I sometimes have a hard time getting my arms in sleeves. It's because I'm a pastry chef. Not only do we wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning, but we get a workout with our arms. Wish that was so with the rest of our body, though. Can't certainly work our abs doing this, but we can certainly work our arms doing this. So we're just going to continue rolling this out to the right thickness and continue to lightly flour the counter so that the dough doesn't stick. We don't want to do a heavy flour, but just enough so that it doesn't stick. We want to keep the edges as much as possible. We're going to trim these as we do with a Danish dough and as we do with croissant dough, because the edges, even though we're careful not to smash them, we still want to have a clean cut to make sure that it raises properly and you can see all those delicious layers. I think what I said earlier in one of our previous episodes, that it is 1,000 leaves is what puff pastry is known as. And all of those techniques are there for a reason, which is why I'm trying to teach you at home how to do this a little bit easier, because it took me years to learn how to do this. So you can learn how to do it in 30 minutes. It's a great lesson. So this is about as thick as I want it. So it's about 1/4 inch thick, and we have a nice roll on it. Now, you've seen me use our accordion wheel, and if you don't have that, we can certainly use the pastry or the pizza cutter as our pastry wheel, and it works just as well. So we're going to go ahead and get our pastry cutter and our pizza cutter and our pizza wheel, and we're going to go ahead and start cutting. So we're going to take our pastry wheel and we're going to just cut the edges. And it doesn't have to be a fluted wheel, it can be just a regular pizza wheel. But I like to have all the edges trimmed so that we have clean cuts all the way around. And we can still use those scraps. I think I said in one of my previous episodes with the Danish dough that we can save these scraps. We don't have to lose them. So we're going to set that aside, and we're going to take our large cutter And now that we've trimmed, we can take our cutter to the very edge so that we can get everything that we want out of our pastry dough. We don't want to waste anything. So we can just take it right to the edge again and cut. And we can move it back and forth a little bit, but we don't want to twist. The twisting will ruin the lamination, so we just want to press down, and I just gently move it back and forth so that it releases. And if it gets a little sticky for some reason, just take some flour, tap it off like that so it doesn't stick. Now we're going to do something to these little flat pieces called docking. We're going to take the fork and we're going to prick the bottom, and we do that because the puff pastry puffs, and we don't want it to puff too much because that's going to be the bottom of our tart. So we're going to dock them. Now when we make pastry or puff pastry in the bakery, we've got big docking wheels with little spikes that come out on a roller, and we just boom, 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 and do that, but you don't need that at home. So we're just going to take our fork and we're going to prick them like this. And we don't want to go all the way through the dough, but if you do, it really doesn't matter because it'll puff up and seal itself off anyway. But we want to allow a good 2 inches apart because they do puff. We'll dock these, then we're going to brush it with egg wash. And this, you know, the egg wash acts like a glue. Now, if you're eggless in your house, again, you can use milk. If you don't have any dairy in your house, you could use a little bit of water, although you won't get the same finish on the product that you would. So we're going to take another cut of our tart, and we're going to use the smaller tart cutter and put it inside. And we have a little window like this, and we're going to lay it right over top of that. And that's all we're going to do with that. So we're going to continue with that and make 6 of our little ones. And as we never waste anything in the bakery, I save these little pieces and I put some, bake them off and put some frangipane on it or a piece of fruit, and sell them as little tart bites. And it works really great. Or it can be a chef's delight and put a little bit of pastry cream on a baked little square, and that's lunch. Because my excuse for eating the pastry cream is that it's got milk, which is really good for us, and it's got a little bit of butter. So it takes a lot of dough to make these. As you can see, you can use the Pepperidge Farm frozen sheets of pastry, and they work just as well. Just make sure you thaw it out in the refrigerator before you use them, and do the same process like I'm doing now, except you don't want to roll it any thinner than what you have, what the sheets are already, because they're already pretty thin. So there's our little tart shells, and we're going to brush them again with egg wash, and we're going to put some of our delicious sanding sugar on it because that makes it so beautiful. We're not going to dock the top of the shells like this. We're just going to leave them that way so that they puff up really nice. And sometimes during the baking process, I'll check on them because they bake for about 15 minutes. They do take a minute to bake now. You'd think that they would bake pretty quickly, but they don't. They take about 15, sometimes 20 minutes, depending on how your oven is. So we're going to grab some sanding sugar. And if you get some of it in the inside of the tart, that's not a bother. It's just more deliciousness as far as I'm concerned. But we just gently sprinkle it around the edges. And this gives it a nice glistening look to your finished product. I know my kids used to smell their food. They smelled before they even looked. I don't know if any of your kids are used to do that as a child, but I have grandkids that do that. My daughter used to do it too. Anyway, so that's it. So these are ready for the oven, 350 degrees. Start checking them at about 10 minutes. You might want to rotate the pan to make sure that they bake evenly, because most ovens don't bake evenly unless you have a nice convection oven, which we do at the bakery, but home bakers normally don't. So we're going to go ahead and bake these off, and we're going to let them cool, and we'll come back and fill them with our delicious pastry cream and our fruit. See you in a minute. So we're back with our puff pastry, and we've rolled it again into a square shape. And once again, we're going to trim the edges a little bit to make sure that we have a nice clean cut. You know, because after rolling, we don't want the edges to be smushed so they don't puff real good. And these we don't want to save, so you can just throw them away. And we're not losing much, but it is beneficial to the end product. And so this is a wheel of Brie, and something that I learned while working this year to get my Christmas party together. I went to my cheesemaker and was asking for some Brie, and I happened to turn it over and look at the label and saw that it had been aged with a penicillin mold, which was something that I'd never seen in a Brie cheese before. And I asked him about it, and he said he'd never heard of it either, but clearly it was on the label. And so those of us like me who have a severe penicillin allergy, make sure when you buy Brie cheeses or any cheese to make sure you know what it's aged with so that you don't have any kind of an adverse reaction. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our egg wash and we're going to brush the ends of our puff pastry and a little bit around on the inside. And so in papillote in French just means in the pocket, we're encasing it. And so we're just going to take this and wrap it around the Brie and kind of glue it together. Remember, this is our glue. We're going to bring the ends up together in the middle, and we're going to stand it up because we want to make a little rose on top. And we're going to twist this like that, and then we're going to just open up these little petals so that when it bakes, it's going to puff up and look like a nice little rose. And so that's basically what it is. It's very easy to do. And again, if you don't want to make your puff pastry from scratch, you can do the Pepperidge Farm frozen product. It works really well, and it puffs up really great. You know, if you don't have time, if you want family or friends, say, hey, let's get together and have a glass of wine, and you know, you want to do something nice for your friends and bring something this elegant. It looks very elegant, and it's not hard to do at all. We want to be sure that we brush the outsides good with the egg wash because that'll give it a nice golden brown texture. And we're going to just sprinkle it a little bit with the sanding sugar to just give it a little bit of a sparkle. This is a savory dish, considered a savory dish, but we are going to make a brown sugar pecan glaze to go over this, and we're going to plate it with some wonderful fresh fruit. So we're going to get this in the oven and let it bake for about 15 minutes at 350 degrees, and then we'll come back and we'll plate it with our fruit. See you in a few minutes. So we're back with our Voyavent tarts. And as you can see, they've just baked up just beautiful. We're going to go ahead and put some pastry cream on the bottom first. That's been chilling in the refrigerator. And we just spread a little bit on the bottom like that. And then we're going to make a strawberry fan. So these are some beautiful berries I found. And so to make a strawberry fan, we're just going to cut, not all the way through, but cut almost to the stem in vertical cuts. And then we're going to very gently spread it apart like this. And then we're going to take our apricot glaze. Now this is, we've used this before in our episodes, but it's apricot jam that's been pushed through a sieve and warmed so we get all the chunks out. But I want this to look really nice and shiny. So we're going to brush the apricot jam over the fruit before we place it on the little tart, like that. Then we're going to take some blueberries and some blackberries, and we're going to put it in the bowl because it's easier to do it this way with this small fruit. And we're going to put a little bit of the glaze in the bowl, and then we're going to toss it with a spoon or a fork, whichever we have here, and just coat the berries a little bit with the fruit. It actually seals the berries so that they don't leak any juice, so that you can make this ahead for about an hour ahead of time from your party or whatever you're making this for. So we're going to place this tart on our serving plate. Now if you're using a buffet, you can place these on a long white or silver, whatever, or a colorful tray, and you can sprinkle some mint leaves around or some fresh glazed fruit around it. But I often like to take a berry or two and just put it like that, just to give it a little extra oomph on the plate. And so that is our French Voyavent tart. So we're back with our Brie and Papillote, and I've got some pecans toasting just for about 4 to 5 minutes on the stove. And let me get the Brie for you so you can see how beautiful it looks. And this is our Brie and Papillote when it's baked. And so we're going to take these off. I can smell these now. We're going to take these off the stove. Get that little loose one in there. And what we're going to do is we're going to melt our butter. We're going to let this melt, then we're going to put the brown sugar in it until the brown sugar is completely dissolved. And you can smell it. I love the butter is a great smeller for sure. We're going to transfer our Brie here to the plate with our crusty French bread, which is how I serve it. If you want to serve it with some, we've got some berries here. You can certainly serve it with stone fruit like sliced peaches or apricots and grapes. Whatever your favorite fruit is what you put on this Brie plate, because it's absolutely beautiful. So we're going to go ahead and add the brown sugar and just keep stirring. We don't want to let it sit because it will burn, so we want to keep it moving. Sometimes the brown sugar and butter are a little stubborn. They don't want to marry too well. So you just have to keep stirring and melting until they decide to get together and hold hands. We don't want to see a greasy look like it is now. We want it to be a very cohesive sauce. We don't want it to separate on the plate. And sometimes it actually works a little bit better to use a fork or a small little whisk to stir this together to emulsify it if it's being a little bit stubborn for you. In fact, I think I'm probably going to get a little whisk and see if we can't bring this together a little bit quicker here. So if you're using a non-stick pan, of course, we don't want to use a wire whisk in there. You want to use something that is coated for your whip. But you can see now that it's starting to come together a little bit easier with the whisk than it did with a spatula. So now you can start seeing it's starting to emulsify together, and it's going to turn into a beautiful, beautiful sauce. And in just a couple of seconds, we're going to add our pecans in this. Not all of them. We're going to add probably 2/3 of it. And we're going to let the pecans cook a little bit in it so that the pecans kind of get candied and delicious. So we're going to do that now. And we're going to save a little for sprinkling on top. And now that it's emulsified, we can go ahead and go back to our spatula and let this cook for just another minute. And then we're going to pour this sauce over our Brie. So now it smells like a caramel, and that's what we want. You can't smell it from here because we don't have smell-o-vision, but it's definitely a great smell. So we're going to go ahead and turn this off, and we're going to pour this over the Brie. And then we're going to take a few raw pecans that we've toasted, and we're just going to sprinkle around to give it a little extra crunch. And then whatever fresh fruit that you have going on, you want to sprinkle around as well. Like I said, grapes work great with this. Stone fruit, slices of apples that you've sprinkled with a little bit of lemon juice so they don't turn on you on your plate. So this is what our Brie and Papillote with fresh fruit and crusty bread looks like. So we're going to cut into this so you can see how it looks on the inside. So I'm going to just take the bread off for just a minute so we can get a good look at it. And let me grab a knife real quick. You're going to slide this down. And normally we cut into this in a wedge kind of way. And be very careful because the caramel is really hot and you can get burned on this. So we want to be very, very careful. I usually use a pie cutter to cut into this. You can just see the Brie is just molten and beautiful in here. It's just a wonderful, wonderful main course. It can be an appetizer, it can be a dessert, it can be many, many things, and served with a great crusty bread is just a delicious way to enjoy a Sunday brunch. So we're back with our puff pastry square again, and we're going to make palmier cookies, which is called elephant cookies that you see in the Chinese restaurants a lot of the times on their buffets. But we're making a traditional French palmier with cinnamon and sugar, which is our favorite and our bakery's favorite. If you don't like cinnamon and sugar, you don't have to put cinnamon in your sugar, but we do need to butter the inside of the pastry and brush it and sprinkle some sugar on it. So like I said, if you don't want to put in your cinnamon, you don't have to. So once again, we're going to cut the edges to make sure that we have a clean cut for our puff to raise. And then we'll throw those scraps away. We cannot reuse these. Getting some melted butter, and I think we've got maybe a half a stick of butter, but we're not going to be using it all. You might want to start with a quarter stick. And if you need to melt a little bit more, that's fine. Again, these are fast cookies to make. If you have guests come over at the last minute, or you want to just add something simple to your dessert table, that's really kind of fun to do, and kids can help you with this. This is an easy one for kids to do. So we can go ahead and start sprinkling our cinnamon and sugar all over until it's completely covered. And we want a good heavy sprinkling, because these are going to caramelize in the oven. We're going to over sprinkle the edges because we want to get the edges too. So that looks like it's about good. And so we're just going to slightly pat the sugar in, and sometimes if I have a little bit of butter left over, I'll just sprinkle the tops like this with the pastry brush. You know, you can pour the butter on the pastry, but I really wouldn't recommend it, only because you get too much butter on it and it'll just make it soggy. So invest in a little pastry brush. They're pretty inexpensive, and just sprinkle it like that. And then we're going to start rolling, and we're going to roll to the center from both ends. So we're going to do a very tight, like a jelly roll. So we're going to just roll it like this and press it down. And then we're going to just keep rolling until we get about to the halfway mark here. And if you need to make a little mark so that you know where about the halfway mark is, then go ahead and do that. And so we're just going to pick it up a little bit and roll it over on itself. We want to make sure it's a fairly tight roll so that it doesn't start coming apart in the oven, because it will puff up. So we're just about there. Once we get it rolling good, there we go. And then we're going to start to do the same thing on the other side. So you kind of have to work backwards or from the opposite direction, but that's okay. Press it down to start the roll. And if you don't get it perfect, don't worry about it. These cookies are very forgiving, and they're just beautiful when they puff and bake. So it doesn't have to be perfect. I've been doing this a long time. These are much better than what you get in the restaurant, that's for sure. And again, if you don't want to make your own puff pastry, you can buy the puff pastry sheets in the store, and it will be just as delicious. So we're going to take a little bit of the butter, and we're just going to run it down the center seam. And I do this just to help the cookies stick to each other. We're just going to lightly press them together like that. And then we're going to grab our knife, and we're just going to cut them in about close to 1 inch. I measure it with my thumb joint. That's how I measure, because I know how long that is. So I can just cut. We just want to cut all the way down and make sure we cut all the way through. So our cookies are all about the same size. And you can make them a little bit thinner if you want to, but I like mine a little bit thicker. But again, it's your cookie. You can make it yours by how thick or thin you cut it. Let me get this out of the way here and bring our sprayed cookie sheet, and we've got our parchment paper on our cookie sheet. And as you can see, we've got these, it looks like this. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our cinnamon and sugar. We're just going to dip the bottoms in our cinnamon and sugar and place them on the sheet, and we're just going to press them down just a little bit like that. And that's what you want to see. And so we're going to do these with all of the cookies until we get all of them on the sheet. And we want to put them a couple of inches apart, because these do puff out pretty good. So, and we'll come back and press them down all at the same time. But you can see that they come apart, and that's perfectly normal. That's what they do. And we just roll them back together and press them down. And it's a nice little treat, because it's not heavily sweet and it's not a lot. It's just kind of the right amount for a little midday snack. And then we're going to sprinkle them again on this side with cinnamon and sugar. I probably could actually put some over on this side too, even the tray out. And we're going to bake these, and halfway through the baking time, we're going to flip them over so that they caramelize on the opposite side. So we're just going to sprinkle again with a little bit of cinnamon and sugar. So this side caramelizes when we flip them over. And there we go, our palmiers are ready for the 350-degree oven. We're going to bake for about 7 to 8 minutes, and then we're going to check them and flip them and bake them probably for another 5 minutes. So we'll see you back in just a few. So our palmiers are done. We've flipped them and they're caramelized on both sides. They do need to cool completely because of the caramelization. You don't want to burn your mouth, although I can't tell you how many times I have not waited long enough and burned the roof of my mouth trying to get one of these hot palmiers. So we're just going to go ahead and plate them. Like I said, they're a very delicate cookie. They're crumbly, they're just caramelized, and they're delicious. This is something that you just don't want to miss, making fresh from scratch. And sometimes I just, if you're decorating your plate for service, just sprinkle a little bit of cinnamon. You don't have to do it if you don't want to, but it does give it a nice little look. And these cookies are slick. They're not a heavy cookie. They're light as a feather, so they do slide off the plate, so be careful when you move the plate. And those are our cinnamon sugar palmiers. This is Chef Deborah from Rocca's Bakery signing off this time, and join us next time when we're doing almond puff loaf in our next episode.